have been a pastor for a long time. Longer than I probably care to admit, because then you'd know how old I was. As with any vocation, pastors go through trends. I bet you thought we were immune to that, but we're not. We are human like the rest of you. I even have the gray hair to prove it. When I first became a pastor, the prevailing thought was that Christmas Eve sermons needed to razzle-dazzle. If we could come out here and give an electrifying sermon, suddenly all of you would flock to the pews of our churches on days other than Christmas Eve and Easter. As pastors, we all wanted to outdo each other. Pastors are competitive too, if you didn't know that, in our Christmas Eve show. Did you break out in song during your sermon? Tap dance, roller skate, shoot a praise band member out of a cannon? Wait, we didn't have praise band at 3. Shoot a choir member out of a cannon? Any choir members volunteering? Oh, Kanina's going to do it. All right, next year. Next year. So y'all have to come back next year because Kanina's going out of a cannon. Well, the bigger, the better. But as trends do, this one faded and actually swung in the other direction. Many of us as pastors have come to realize or embrace that the story speaks for itself. Maybe we don't even need a sermon at all. Take off the roller skates. What do they have to do with Jesus anyway? No pyrotechnics, although my husband continues to be disappointed by this every year. He's itching to shoot someone out of a cannon or do some fireworks or at least a smoke show. But who needs fireworks when our story has a star, an angel, a message from heaven, and a baby born? I resonate with this school of thought more than the tap dancing pastor trend, although I can tap dance. And even though my husband is disappointed that I won't let him set off fireworks, what he doesn't know is the trustees would say no anyway. So we have to be content with fire as we sing Silent Night together on our candles that stay on our candles, not up in the air. And even though this is more the school of thought that I embrace, that the story speaks for itself, here I am, standing before you preaching. I could have just let Carol Ann read the story and let it preach for itself, which I think it does. What more is there to say than that God loved us enough to come down to earth and be with us? There really isn't more to say about the story of Jesus' birth in Bethlehem, but there is always something to say about how it relates to us, sitting here, gathered together to hear this story yet again. And for some of you, since I won't get to talk to you again until Easter, I got to make it good. Not good with tap dancing kind of good, just a good sermon. And it's okay, it really is. These stories, the story of birth at Christmas and resurrection at Easter, matter. If these are the only stories that we hear all year long, they are the stories we should hear. And it matters that we gather together and tell them year after year and hand them over to new generations like the first people handed fire from one hand into another. These stories bring light and life into our world. We gather here each Christmas Eve and we pause from the busyness of the season to remember a story of love. I like to think that we leave here just a little bit different than when we walked through the doors. Maybe a little more reflective, maybe humbled a bit, perhaps with a spark of love kindled in our hearts yet again. And that really is what this story is about. And that's why we both tell it every year and talk about it. Because the story itself happened a long time ago. And it might not matter much at all if it was nothing more than the story of someone born 2,000 years ago. But it is a transformational story that invites each of us to know that we are loved enough that God would choose to come down to earth for us. And that we are invited into the story to be active participants who carry that love out into the world to others. Sometimes, as I prepare yet again to preach on this story, I wonder, what if we stopped telling it? Stopped handing it down from generation to generation? What if we stopped remembering Mary, courageous and faithful, willing to say yes to love even when she was risking her own life? Or what if we stopped talking about Joseph, a man willing to protect his family even when he opened himself up to ridicule and scorn? Or the angels who come to the shepherds and say, "Do not be afraid, because our God is one who rules with grace upon grace rather than fear." Or the shepherds, marginalized workers out in the dark of night, laboring to provide for their communities, who are sought out by God to be bearers of world-changing news. Or Jesus, God come to us just as we are, to love us rather than condemn us, the one who brought us grace upon grace. But maybe more than wondering what we would lose if we stopped telling this story, I worry about what we would lose if we stopped living this story. At FUMCO, at First United Methodist Church of Olympia, the thread that runs through everything we do is the unshakable belief that beloved is where we all begin, and that every person, all people, are beloveds of God. We are a community of faith working together to love the world and to live out this story of God coming to us, loving us exactly as we are, and also calling us to grow into the kind of people who can love the world without limits. This story sets a high bar. Mary risks her life to say yes to the call God puts on her life. Joseph receives a vision that asks him to remain loyal to Mary, even though he probably faced ridicule for marrying a woman already pregnant with a baby. The story asks that we trust that the voices on the margins have a prophetic truth to share, and that we should pause and listen. This story asks that we let love be born in our lives again and again. That when we have come to the point of giving up on humanity, on ourselves, on our communities, and on the world, that we once again make ourselves vulnerable and trust that we don't have to save the world, but we can be the peacemakers and the hope bringers, people who show kindness to those who are disenfranchised. We can be the justice seekers, and ultimately we can be people who love abundantly. We want to invite you, if you are not already a part of this community, to come and be a part of this church, because we are trying to be those people. We don't do it perfectly. And that's okay, because we are not the saviors of the world. We'll leave that to Jesus. And I can't promise you fireworks or praise band members shooting out of cannons, although maybe now I can. No, I'm sorry, a choir member shooting out of a cannon. But what I can say is we do strive to be a place where all people are cherished as beloveds of God, and to live that out here in community, but maybe even more important, to live that out outside of these walls. As we were preparing to worship together, one of our congregation members came to me and said, "I need to ask for prayers for a homeless couple. The need in the world is so great." And I said, "Yeah, it can be exhausting sometimes." And it can be. And that's okay, because we are human and we get tired and worn out and weary. But that's why we come together and tell this story again and again, so that when we are at our weariest, we might hear a voice crying out and saying, "Do not be afraid, for I come with good news of great joy. I come to bring you grace upon grace." And you are invited to go and live that out in the world. So friends, may love be rekindled in you tonight. just like the flames that burn and flicker on the candles. As we share in singing, as we light the candles together, may you find that you leave this place a little more loved, at least knowing that, and with that love kindled yet again in your hearts. Amen.